All right, so in this proof, what we're trying to do is prove that triangle ADC, right here, is congruent to triangle BDC, right here. And if you couldn't tell by the heading, we're going to make use of the reflexive property at some point during this proof, which tells you that a side or an angle is congruent to itself. So if something shares the same side or angle, we're going to say it's congruent to itself, and it's going to help us with this proof. So first, let's start by writing down the given information. So our given information says that AC is congruent to BC, which we should label on our diagram as well with little tick marks like that. And we also know that D is the midpoint of AB. So we're going to use this fact that D is the midpoint of AB here. Since D is in the middle of AB, what it does is it cuts AB into two congruent segments. AD and BD have to be congruent to each other. So I'll label that first, and then I'll write it in the proof. So we have that AD is congruent to BD, and the reason, of course, is actually just this given statement that D is the midpoint, because if D is the midpoint would split up this segment into two equal parts. Now, if we're trying to prove these triangles congruent, we already have two sides, and we could get that angle if we went through isosceles triangles, knowing that this is an isosceles triangle and knowing that those angles have to be equal. But since this is literally titled the reflexive property, why don't we use the reflexive property, where we find a side or an angle that's congruent to itself. And the side here that's congruent to itself that they both share is side CD. And the way we usually label this with an X. So let me put that in the proof. So CD is congruent to CD because of the reflexive property. And the reason we want to use this is because CD is part of this triangle and it's part of this triangle. And obviously it has to be congruent to itself because it's the same side. All right, so we're ready to prove that these two triangles are congruent now. These triangles ADC and BDC are congruent by side, side, side. You can see we have the black sides here that we were given, the red sides that we got from D being the midpoint of AB, and this blue side they both share due to the reflexive property.